Welcome back to the Beauty Body Balance Podcast. Hi, I'm Dr. Erin, Lucie, nurse practitioner and owner of Luminate Clinic here in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Today, we are going to talk about the foundational labs to our functional nutrition program. And I have with me today Micah Lucie, who is a certified functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner, as well as my husband.
That's the best title of all. Yeah.
And he is going to talk about his functional nutrition, what we call the foundational labs, which are going to be the labs that are most important to figuring out what is going on with your symptoms.
Absolutely. So when we talk about labs can be kind of confusing. If you've ever visited a normal doctor, a Western medicine doctor, they do labs and they have some different markers and they tell you the ranges, and it really doesn't make a lot of sense. But for a functional lab, it's very different. The goal is not just to have a bunch of markers that give us information, but to use that information to tie to what's going on inside your body. So not just symptoms, but getting down further to like the root cause and really understanding. And we follow what's called HIDDEN. And HIDDEN is an acronym that stands for hormones, inflammation, digestion, detoxification, energy production, and nervous system function. So understanding really all these key areas of the body is what these labs are for. Oh, I continue. So when it comes to some of the foundational ones, one of my favorite tests I do is called a GI map or gastrointestinal map. And it's a stool test. And the goal of that is to really paint a picture of the gut microbiome. We have more bacterial cells that are not ours versus our own cells. And much of that is housed within the gut microbiome. Your neurotransmitters, 70% of your immune system, hormones, tons of things are happening within that gut microbiome. So understanding where that is at is really going to give us a picture of your overall health. And when we understand things like that, like do you have pathogens that are going on that we don't know about? Do you have bacterial imbalance? Do you have strains of bacteria that are growing that shouldn't? Do you have worms? Lots of different markers in there. And what's cool about that test is they're measuring to like the millionth quintile. So it's not just some random range. They're getting down to the nitty gritty of those markers. And once we use that sort of test, we can build a lifestyle kind of program around that to help you manage stress, help you manage the right types of nutrition for you. And nutrition, we also have a lab that's called a mediator release test or food sensitivity test. And it's a blood-based test. And what's really fascinating about that is that the foods on this list, and there's 176 foods, chemicals, additives, all kinds of things on there. They're showing us what's perfect for you. But it doesn't matter if you've eaten these things or not, or consumed them or not. If they're a sensitive item for you, it's still going to show up. And what's cool about that too is it uses a color coding system along with very specific measurements. Green items on that list are fine for you. Yellow are something that is more cautionary and giving us information that we can use. And then red is going to be a sensitivity for you that is probably something you're going to have avoid for the rest of your life. So for example, I had peanut, wheat, oregano, and vanilla were my 4 reds that showed up on my test. What were your reds?
My reds were gluten. That's all I remember.
Was that gluten? I thought you had cottage cheese or something too.
No, cottage cheese was yellow.
Was
and
yellow?
I've been off I had cottage cheese for lunch today, but I've been off cottage cheese for a year.
And she's back on it now.
I'm back on it now because it's better.
It is better. So when we look at that, on top of understanding the right foods for you, it's also giving us further clues into your health. And one of the biggest things that we're looking at is, do you have leaky gut? And you've probably heard that term before, leaky gut. That term's been around for a while. But what it really means is that the intestinal lining that is protecting things from getting into your bloodstream is compromised. That's what leaky gut is. Things are getting through that shouldn't. It's really interesting. The cell layer is called epithelial cells, and they're basically locking arms. You think like people locking arms. They're trying to keep things from getting in between them. When your food gets broken down into the right size molecule or nutrient, it then actually gets absorbed through the cell. But what happens over time is inflammation, food sensitivities, stress, a lot of things start to damage that protective barrier. And when food molecules get in between those cells when they shouldn't, they can get into the bloodstream, and now your body views that food as an enemy. So for her, cottage cheese, even though it was yellow, at that time was not being broken down properly, And the body's saying like, I don't want this. This is something I should not have, even though it was fine before. So a lot of times those food sensitivities can develop over time.
And it's not like a rash.
Yeah, it's not
like
a
food
rash.
allergy. It's more the inflammation, which would show up as joint pain, headaches, generalized fatigue or malaise.
Gut discomfort, diarrhea. There's a lot of different things that would point to a food sensitivity. So acne, absolutely.
Rosacea.
The
list goes on and
the
on.
list goes on. Hair loss, hair thinning is another part of that. So, but basically, once you get to that point where you have leaky gut, where things are causing that sensitivity from like a blood-based level, the body starts to essentially attack itself, and you get things like autoimmune disease, and there's a whole chain of horrible stuff down the line that can happen. One of the biggest areas that we really focus on, that I feel like that sets us apart, is our skills with hormones. And I'd like for her to kind of speak on the hormone side.
For hormones, what we see is, first of all, you have to test your hormones and see what's going on. And for women, we have to test on specific days. So if you're having regular cycles or having cycles at all, we do a blood test on day 3 of your cycle. And then we also do another blood test on day 21. And this tells us the ratios between your estrogen and your progesterone, as well as the testosterone. We also check DHEA. Sometimes we'll test cortisol. And we look at all of these hormones together because we want to make sure that they're balanced and they're at appropriate levels, or what we would call like optimal levels or functional levels, where they're actually functioning. Because you could have estrogen and progesterone that were balanced with one another, but they might be suboptimal and not effective, or being effective the way that they should be working. So we can check the levels with blood, which is the quickest way, because we can draw it in house, or we can, you can go to a lab and have them checked. That's one of the fastest ways that we can check. And then if you've already been on hormones, then we check a urine sample. And the benefits to having your hormones checked in urine is that it's actually telling you what we call metabolites and how your body is metabolizing the hormones that you're taking. So if you're taking estrogen, let's say you're taking estrogen orally, it can break off into several different types of estrogen, including like the good estrogen and the bad estrogen that can create breast cancer. And so we want to make sure that your body is not converting the hormones that you're taking into the bad type of estrogen. And a urine metabolite test is one of the best ways to do that, because we're seeing exactly how your body is breaking the hormones down. So for patients that have already been on hormones for a year, I love to do a urine test for that. And then we can also do a saliva test, which is another way that we can test the hormones, is with saliva. And saliva is really ideal for patients that aren't taking hormones orally. Like if you're doing a topical cream or an injection or a pellet, saliva is a great way to test that. And then also if we're testing cortisol hormone, cortisol is a hormone that we can test in the blood, but your cortisol changes through the day. So it starts out kind of like really high around 10 a.m., gets a little bit higher in the noon area, and then it goes down to a lower area, like, I don't know, when the sun goes down, basically, is when it should go down. So we have to test it 4 or 5 times during the day to make sure we're seeing that appropriate curve. And the only way we could do that is with actually urine or with saliva testing through the day. Nobody wants to have their blood drawn like 4 or 5 times. You could, but don't.
And cortisol is really one of the keys, in my opinion. Understanding cortisol is one of the keys to overall health. And cortisol, you can also call that the stress hormone. But cortisol, its job is to help basically give you energy, help stimulate, getting blood sugar used, all those kinds of things. But the problem is that for a lot of people, when they're dealing with high levels of stress, when they have inflammation going on inside their body, that cortisol is being called into play all the time. So she talked about this curve that basically, if you ever have a chance, you can Google looking at the cortisol curve, but basically in the beginning of your day, it's the highest. It gets down to a very low point at night. Melatonin, things like that come into play to get you ready for sleep. But if you have cortisol going all the time, the body can only make one choice. It can't go down 2 pathways. So if you are under stress, if your body's calling for cortisol, that's what it's going to focus on. It cannot pull you out of that, put you into what's called a parasympathetic state, or the rest and digest state, because it is busy dealing with cortisol. So understanding those levels is so important for your health. Because, you think about a lot of people say, well, I'm getting sleep at night, but I'm feeling so tired when I wake up in the morning. I feel like I'm going to bed at the right time. But what's happening is maybe their blood sugar's imbalanced. Maybe they're eating too late at night. Maybe they have unresolved stress. Maybe they have physical injuries that are causing low-grade inflammation. There's a lot of things happening during someone's sleep that can make that cortisol come into play when it shouldn't.
And what he's talking about is if you're looking at a chart of hormones, in order to make your hormones, you have to be able to have enough, they're called steroid hormones. You have to have enough sterols, basically, which is your healthy fats or your cholesterol, to make your hormones. And those hormones there's two different pathways. So it can either go this way and go to cortisol. It'll go this way to make your estrogen, progesterone, DHEA, and testosterone. So if you're stressed all the time, then the rest of your hormones are not being made. Right. So we want to make sure that balance is going towards the hormones that you do need to prevent heart disease, osteoporosis, all stroke, cancer, like all the things. You want it to go to your healthy hormones instead of your cortisol, which is just going to increase your insulin levels and make you more unhealthy.
And risk of diabetes goes up as well.
What's another lab test that we can do?
Yeah, some other interesting markers that we look at. One is called urinary bile acids. And what that marker is telling us is the state of your liver. Is your liver overburdened? Is your liver having problems breaking down toxins and things like that? When the liver gets overburdened, what happens is things that should be broken down, such as toxins, hormones like estrogen, all those things are sitting there, still producing, effects onto the body as far as like affecting the way your gut produces, affecting your neurotransmitters, affecting your hormone levels. The liver is really what we call grand central station of detoxification. And what that means is that you think about like a train yard, all these train cars are coming in for process. The liver is doing its job to break them down, reutilize them, and send things out of the body through waste. But if the liver is having a hard time, those train cars back up. And if you think of a train yard that has 100 train cars on it and nothing's happening, those things are sitting there causing problems in the body. So super important. Another huge marker is something called zonulin, and zonulin sounds like a weird made-up name, but zonulin is actually an enzyme that the body uses to flush out the gut lining so that things don't get into the bloodstream. And understanding if you have high zonulin, that means that we have a compromised gut barrier, and that the body's using that zonulin more and more and more to try to clear out issues before it gets into the bloodstream. That's the thing it doesn't want to happen. Another marker we look at is something called 8-OHDG. And this marker, if you think about your cells, it is measuring oxidative damage to your cells. So for example, if I cut open an apple and I have it sitting on a table, give it 5 minutes, and you'll see that white inside start to look brown. That's what we're looking at as far as the damage to your cells. The problem is with cellular damage is that your cells copy, they replicate. And if they're damaged, if the DNA inside of them, if the mitochondria, if those are damaged within that cell, it's actually copying itself damaged. So if I went to a printer machine or a copy machine, and I made a copy of a copy and another copy of that, the original image would start to look very distorted. You wouldn't be able to tell what it was in the beginning. So that's what's happening with your cells. And if you remember, we are made of cells. So our brains, every single organ, every part of us is cells. So if we have damaged cellular function, that's going to cause a lot of problems in our health.
One of my favorite foundational tests that we do is by the DNA company. And what I really love about it is that it provides actionable results. And some of the labs that we do, like the, not now, but before, like the gut health testing, we would get all the information and it's like, oh, you have these millions and billions of this type of cell, but what do we do with this information? And it wasn't actionable. And with the DNA company test, it gives you actionable results on what you can do, or your action items. And the DNA test is you do a saliva test. So that's nice, pain-free, blood-free. You swab your cheek and then you ship it off. And then in 3 or 4 weeks, you get your results back. And it's really doing a deep dive into who you are and why your body responds to specific things and responds to stress, and what kind of environment you sleep better in, and like what else, all the things.
Yeah. So like she mentioned, DNA is really the blueprint for you. It's the instructions for you, right? So as far as like eye color, hair color, all that kind of stuff, that your DNA is really the thing you have from birth all the way until the end. It doesn't change. So that's why I love that DNA test, because it's not something that can really be affected by, the things you're doing in your life. Your genetics are what they are. And it really gives, like she said, more actionable steps. So what are the best types of workouts for you? What is the best career for you? So for her, for example, entrepreneur, things like that were the right career type for her because she has low risk of burnout. For somebody else, it could be completely different. I actually had a client, one of her biggest complaints was hair thinning. And we were trying to figure out, she's like, I don't know what's going on. And she came to me kind of at the end of that process because she had run out of options. On top of everything else, we did her DNA test, and she had a specific gene that, if expressed a certain way, would actually cause her hair to thin. So with that DNA test, and along with other things that I do, it gave me tons of actionable information as a practitioner of how to adjust her lifestyle, how to modify the things, the behaviors and choices she was making so that her hair would come back. And it did. Actually came all the way back. Actually, I had another client, and we were talking about movement and exercise and how to start that into her life because she was pretty sedentary. And she was like, well, I don't like to run. And if you're going to tell me to run, I'm not going to do it. And her genetics actually said that running for her, like tons of cardio, was the wrong thing for her genes. So her body was already telling her, hey, look, this is not something we're built for, as the way my genetics are laid out. So a lot of times our bodies are actually telling us the things that we should and shouldn't be doing. And confirming that with genetics is huge. I'm actually excited. We have 4 kids. I'm excited to do that test on them to find out, like, what is the career they should be doing? What are the things they could be doing starting now to really set them up for success as adults? I think it's going to be fascinating. But those are some of the tests. And really, I get a lot of times people asking, well, what test should I do? Which one should I start with? And if you can,
do them all.
Yeah, do them all if your budget allows, just because we're getting that whole picture of you. It's really difficult just to pick apart one marker at a time without understanding the context behind it. So getting that full picture inside and out, every single system working together, is massive. It's, you're not a car. A lot of times if you have an issue with your car, they're like, hey, it's your alternator, it's your, whatever, it needs to be replaced. You just replace that part and the car keeps going. We're not like that. When one system starts to have issues, everything gets affected down the line. And, something that might start as a little trickle upstream can end up into a waterfall of health problems down the road. So do all the testing you can from a functional perspective, but allow someone like us, for example, whether you go with us, we hope you do, but you need to find someone that's not just going to test and tell you a bunch of information, but they're actually going to take action on those results and give you the tools to transform and make things better.
Who do you think is the best candidate for like a functional nutrition program or foundational testing?
Yeah, I think the best candidate for someone as far as functional medicine goes is someone that has tried everything. They've kind of gone through this carousel of trial and error where they've visited with doctors and doctors are telling them that everything is normal. And they've tried all these random trends that they found on TikTok or Instagram, but nothing is working. I think someone that's at that place that is saying, you know what, it doesn't matter what it takes at this point. I am ready to get out of this. I'll do whatever it takes to not feel like this anymore. That's the perfect candidate. Someone who's just really, dealt with this for a long time. Like, for example, I had a client that has been dealing with IBS for 20 years. She's tried all the medicines, tried all the different tests, had all the scopes done and all that kind of stuff, but still couldn't get out of it. And now we're making a lot of progress in her life on something that's been for 2 decades of her life. I mean, imagine if we started 20 years before, how different things could be for her. So that's the thing for me. It's like, if I knew what I knew now back then, things would be so different, but I'm glad I know it now for sure. So if you are someone that's interested in a functional program, our functional program, the nice thing is that we can do that nationally. Our license goes to all 50 states. So feel free to reach out. We'll make sure that we send the labs to you directly. We'll find the labs to help you do your blood draw that's near you, and we'll take care of everything, guiding you through this journey no matter where you live.